Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to another episode of WTF What's the Frequency? And today, to celebrate Breast Cancer Month, I've got an amazing guest, a real queen of resilience, somebody that decided that breast cancer wasn't going to define them, stop them, and that they weren't going to accept it. This is a real lesson for anybody listening that's had a horrible diagnosis and is feeling frightened and alone, that you really can get through breast cancer with the right attitude and tuning into the right vibration. So, as I've already said, I've got an amazing guest today. She's actually Andrea Moulding, my sister, one of the bravest people I know, one of the strongest characters that I have the pleasure to be related to, and somebody who used breast cancer not only to survive and thrive, but to become a best-selling author, not once, but twice. So please welcome to the show a very special guest, my sister, Andrea Moulding, author extraordinaire.
Hello. I think that's the nicest thing you've ever said to me, Vanessa, being siblings.
Oh, well, what a lovely place to start having a laugh. So, Andrea, I wanted to invite you on today because one of the things people say to me all the time is, you have to understand this is the terrible place that I'm in. I've had the most dreadful news. I've lost my husband. I've lost my job. I'm experiencing burnout. Nothing can be worse than being told that that you have breast cancer. So, do you want to just talk to us about what that was like and how and when you decided that it wasn't going to define you?
Well, yes, I mean, as you know, in 2018, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, and it was an absolutely horrendous shock. And I'm not going to pretend I was brave about it. I remember kind of bawling to you in the car outside the one shop. Do you remember? Telling you, oh my God, I've got breast cancer. And I think that initially the shock is, unless you've experienced it, you can't really explain what it's like. It is absolutely horrendous. And the worst thing about it is they tell you go for, a test, and then they tell you they've got kind of suspicious cells, and then they put you in the quiet room, so by the, horrible furniture and fake clock that, you're in trouble basically. So initially, I have to admit, I was in a terrible place and found it really difficult to hear. But, things did get better. And I think, well, I don't know if you want me to tell you the whole story, if you want to kind of ask me another question, really. But that's how it started. I wasn't the big brave soul that you described in your introduction. I was a bit of a nightmare, to be honest.
Well, that's fine, isn't it? Because you were just being human. Because energetically, emotionally, physically, mentally, it is like being hit by a bus, isn't it? Being given that sort of news. So, at what point? I mean, you obviously didn't stay in the poor me zone for very, very long, did you? I mean, you say I bawled like a banshee. Well, not unsurprisingly, but what was it that finally made you switch into survivor mode?
Well, it's strange because when you first start, you don't have any knowledge at all. And I have to say, I wasn't brave enough to go on the internet and terrify myself. I didn't want to read anything. I found all the medical information absolutely terrifying. They say words like tumour and mass and things like that, and just horrible, horrible words. And then they give you this kind of, and I'm not criticising Macmillan at all because they're an amazing organisation, but you get all this kind of generic information, which is aimed at everyone. And it didn't really resonate with me. It was all a bit kind of nothingy. So I found myself kind of confiding in my best friend, who's a Macmillan nurse. She didn't live locally, but she's real kind of, stuff and nonsense. And she just said, the NHS is the best system in the world. It's absolutely gold standard. What you need to do is stop bawling, just get on the bus. And what she meant was, you need to do whatever you're told to do. That bus will be really bumpy. It'll be a bumpy ride, but it'll get you to where you need to be. And that people will get on to help you, but just stay on, cling on tight. and get to the end of the end of the road, and you'll be absolutely fine. So that became my mantra: stay on the bus, stay on the bus. And that got me through, I think, all the treatment. And when I was having treatment, this doctor told me that one of the side effects is chemo brain, which is a bit like being pregnant without the kind of fun baby at the end of it. It just means that, you can't function basically. And they tell you to do things like Sudoku and read magazines and things. And I just remember going back from the hospital and thinking, I've got to have chemo, I've got to have radiotherapy, I'm going to go bald. But I am not getting chemo brain and just getting really furious about it. And then I was kind of, I had lots of time on my hands, as you can imagine, waiting for appointments and what have you. And I've always wanted to write a book. And I've had this idea in my head for years and years and years. And you know what it's like if you've ever wanted to write a book? You kind of think, oh, I'll do it, but you never have the time. So I thought, right, I'm not doing Sudoku. I'm going to write this book. So I said,
I love that. Just wind that back for a minute. Sudoku, forget it. I'm going to much bigger target. I'm going to write a book, darling. I'm going to become an author. Brilliant.
That's what I decided to do. And I used it to help me through difficult situations. So I wrote a novel called Flying Soul to the Devil, and it's about two runaways. And so, excuse me. And I wrote it in my head when I was going through the MRI machine. I wrote this one of the scenes that's actually in the book, almost word for word. When I was anxious, I used to just escape into my characters, and the whole world was created in my head. It was where I could go when I was sitting in chemo, with things hanging out of me and, not able to go out. It was my fantasy land that I would jump into. And I set myself a target of writing, rather pathetically, 200 words a day. Some days I managed it. Most days I didn't. Some days I managed 1,000 words. But I tried to average it out for 200 words a day. And the book's about 70,000 words. And it took me about 2 years to write, but I managed it. And when I'd done it, I did have an amazing sense of achievement, really. I thought, out of all that kind of horribleness, for want of a better word, I wrote a book and became an author. And another amazing thing that happened was that
and just to pick up on that for a minute, because you've brushed over it, in a very humble way, but it was a bestseller on Amazon, wasn't it? And let's just talk about that book for a minute, because if anyone wants to know what it's like where Ed Sheeran lives, it's written all about Suffolk, isn't it? And the Suffolk coast, and how it was. Is it back in the 70s or the 80s?
80s. Yeah, you're a little bit older than me, Vanessa. It's the 80s.
I love it. Get in there with the dig whenever you can. Absolutely. Yeah, older than you. You're more youthful in every way. But what I loved about the book was that it gave so many references to music and food and sweets and haircuts and things like that I'd really forgotten it existed. But also on this journey of these runaways, it's quite exciting, all the things they get up to, but also the description of all the different areas in Suffolk that they're spending time in. So I felt it was a really beautiful book for anyone to read that was young in the 80s, whether they grew up in Suffolk or not, really.
Well, for me, it was a real kind of nostalgic, kind of growing, coming of age book. And they're two characters from opposite sides of the tracks, obviously, and there's all kind of heavy metal and new romantics and what have you. And I had, when I was in the hospital, I used to have a Pinterest page where I'd kind of Google sweets of the 80s and ice creams of the 80s. And I had this board and I put it all together. I actually had quite a lot of followers at one stage. I don't want you as followers. I'm just trying to research my book. But no, it was very useful to me. It was my escape pod, if you like, whenever things got a little bit tough.
That's that's really great, because so often you've got to if we talk about the vibration just for a moment, so you're in hospital and you're having horrible treatment. You know that it's not going to be, an enjoyable experience. And instead of sitting there feeling sorry for yourself, you transport yourself to the 1980s, to two runaways that are interacting with bikers and gangsters and crazy old ladies and, are held up on a caravan park. It's absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed reading it. And I'm not just saying that because I'm your sister, because you know what I'm like. I can't lie. I
I was
didn't
a
think
bit scared about showing it to you, actually, Vanessa.
I loved it, and all my friends love it, and I continue to give it out to people and get great feedback, of how
I'm
much
writing
they
a
think.
sequel at the moment, so yeah, watch this space.
Oh, fantastic! And are we going to have more gangsters and more bikers and more?
Avon ladies, actually, Vanessa. Yeah,
I'm sorry, what did you?
drug dealing Avon ladies.
Wow, I love that. I don't know if you'll be able to call them Avon ladies. I think you might get sued. You might have to come up with some sort of other
Those are
multi-level
the ladies.
marketing
Yeah.
from some sort of 1980s brand. But
Exactly. Exactly.
that sounds really, really, really interesting.
But
So
sorry.
after you, after you.
No, I was going to say, once I'd written the book, there were several things that came out of it. I made new friends. I got a lot of confidence. So once I was on a roll and had one bestseller, I thought, you know what? I'm going to do another one. I didn't write a novel this time. I felt, like I said before, that all the kind of material that you get when you're going through breast cancer, and I love the NHS, I would never criticise them. They haven't got any money, so that's why they don't kind of invest in counselling and all that sort of stuff. But I felt there was a real gap in the market for a book that tells you everything you need to know, that's funny, that you can dip into. And so I decided I was going to write a kind of guide for people going through breast cancer who wanted to have a laugh, who were scared of all the information like me. So I decided the best title for it, from my best friend, was Stay on the Bus, which was my mantra. So I wrote a book when I was, oh gosh, well, I was still having treatment. I mean, I was having radiotherapy and I think lots of other treatment, but I was coming out the other side. So I used to go down to McDonald's at 6 o'clock in the morning before, I started working again, and knock out about 1,000 words. And actually, it was COVID as well that came about. And I think I went a little bit mad, to be honest. I was thinking in my head, oh, stay on the bus. I'm going to have an avatar, which is going to be a lollipop lady. So for your American listeners, you don't have lollipop ladies, you have crossing guards. But, you don't have zebra crossings either. So I made myself this gigantic lollipop outfit with a great big pink head as kind of nod to breast cancer, which I made out of a beach ball. And I got this yellow fluorescent jacket. And then I made these stop and go signs out of a pizza box with the drumstick. And Mum said I looked like I was landing a plane. And I called myself my avatar Lollipop. And I had all these ideas. I was going to go on social media with this stupid hat and glasses because I was a little bit scared. And then I just threw it away. I thought, you know what? I don't care. I'll just be me. So now I go on social media and I just talk about me. So again, I think it was a kind of confidence. Through the book, I met one of my best friends, Estelle. And from that, we went on and did the podcast, which I'm sure we're going to go on to a little bit later.
Yeah, but before we do, let's just talk about the content in the book, because you've talked a lot about, not having all the information being very brief. And I was talking to another lady that's going to be on another episode of my show later in the month. And she was saying that, so often you're given all this terrible news by somebody that has no empathy. It's just they're telling you that they're going to do something that's going to be really quite unpleasant, and they just have no empathy. It seems like they're just robots with no feeling. Did you experience that?
Oh, yes. Well, the kind of I did a glossary in my book, and one of them is the kind of head honchos of each department tend to be a little bit like that. And I think it's a protection thing for them, to be honest, because they can't absorb all the kind of hysteria of everyone going through it. But I remember when I'd had my biopsy and I was going back from the results, and it was Thursday night at 5 o'clock. And I went to the hospital, met by my surgeon, and she just said, yes, it's cancer, and we are going to have to remove the breast. And I remember just kind of sitting there going, yeah, don't try and wrap it up. Just tell me how it is, you know. Oh, yes, and I booked you in for Monday. So this is Thursday, 5 o'clock. I've got Friday for my pre-ops, you know, going in and weighing me and telling me how fat I am. Then I'm got to tell the kids. Then I've got to pack a bag. And Monday, 7:30 in the morning, I'm at hospital having a mastectomy. Do you know what I mean? It was just a whistle stop, and you don't have time to take a breath. You know, everyone's different, and some people don't have a mastectomy, some people have a lumpectomy, some people don't have chemotherapy, some people do. And that was another challenge of writing the book, because obviously I had to appeal to everyone. So I spent a long time structuring it and saying at the beginning, you might be like me and not have the stomach to read the book from beginning to end, but you can just dip in and read the bits that you want. And I try and make them funny with lots and lots of anecdotes and stories about people and stupid things that happen. And, you know, and hopefully it has had very good reviews, to be honest, from people that get it. But I don't think it's for everyone. But then I didn't write it for everyone. Do you see what I mean?
Well, I think, you know, you wrote it for the irreverent, didn't you? You wrote it for the ones that, you know, are going to say, no, this isn't going to define me. And, you know, again, if you're on that frequency, the book's going to appeal to you. One of the chapters that one of my friends found really useful, and she said, thank God I read the book, was Ring of Fire. The fact that, you know, because she said in none of the information does anybody say your backside's going to be on fire. And she said, I just thought, oh my God, it's all going wrong. I'm going to combust from the backside up, you know.
Oh, I know. And also, I don't criticize, but I say, you know, I hate all that stuff around breast cancer. You have to fight it. You're a warrior. And I'm like, I put in the book, you know, if you want to just go and eat a packet of Tang Fast sticks and listen to Radiohead for 24 hours, just do it. You know, nobody tells you how you have to behave. And you can be, and I talk about how you can go out and disguise, you know, when you have chemo, so you can kind of put shades on and a massive hat. And I had a massive row with somebody when I was picking up a package because I didn't have my passport with me. And I went home, got my passport, and then pretended I was somebody else. So, you know, and there is a real camaraderie with people who've been through breast cancer. You know, it's a club it's like the worst club in the world. This isn't me that said this, somebody else. I don't know who said it. It's the worst club in the world and the best club in the world. Do you know what I mean? You get a lot of humour, make a lot of friends, and I've met Estelle, one of my best friends, through the books and through the podcast. So yeah, it's breast cancer has, you know, obviously it wasn't great. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but the benefits of it, you know, I've become an author. I've become really confident. I don't take anything from anyone anymore. I will stand my ground, and it's made me, I think, a better person. You know, not that I wasn't fabulous before, as you know, Vanessa.
I love it. Yeah, just showing that self-confidence oozing out of every pore.
Every pore.
Let's just talk about that for a minute before we go for a quick break. But something you touched on there, I don't, you know, I put me first. I don't put up with anything from anybody. Do you think that the stress of people pleasing, the stress of not saying no, and not being in control of your life can all add to, you know, putting your body in a position where you can get cancer? Would you say that, you know, you've reduced the stress in your life now?
Well, I still have teenage children, so I'd like to say yes. Yeah, you're right. I think I was a people pleaser. I think I'd do everything at a drop of a hat. Whereas now, you know, my body doesn't allow me to do things, the things that I used to do. Like I've just had breast reconstruction surgery, so I'm not going to be up on the roof changing tiles. Whereas, Mum, you roll your sleeves up and you do everything, don't you? My garden's a tip. I can't garden anymore because, well, not recently, because obviously I've had surgery. But it's also, I think, more about being confident in yourself and enough to say, no, I won't do that. That doesn't work for me. Not in a horrible way, but it's about self-protection. And, people, when you have cancer, people that don't respect your boundaries will fall away. And with cancer, you really do find out who your friends are. People come out of the woodwork that you just would never have thought would be there. And really, really, my friend Anne drove up from Birmingham once a week and took me to lunch. She lived in Birmingham. It's like an hour's drive. Other people that you expect to kind of be there fall away. But it's like it does it for you, that kind of internal housekeeping of your friends, which I think is healthy to do every now and again, because as a person, cancer changes you. You become a different person and you can't take everyone with you. And it's okay because those people were right for you when they were right for you, but they're not right for you now. And cancer shows you that, which is another valuable, if not difficult lesson, I think.
Well, I really want to pause you there, and we're going to pick up on this again because you've just talked about being honest, protecting yourself, which is all part of self-love, and not being fearful to say no, and sometimes not to give any reason why. Particularly as women, we're so used to being expected to say yes, and if we say no, to be able to justify it. And a friend of mine who's Danish and very blunt said, "You've got to learn to say no without giving any reason why. It's just that should be enough, really." And actually, that's a really good vibration to be on, that you're confident enough to just say no. So let's come back to this in a minute. Please stay with us, everybody. We're having a very interesting conversation about breast cancer. And we're just going to take a short break now for our lovely sponsors, My LifeSpring.
Ignite your vitality. Meet the LifeSpring Gold Card, a quantum leap in wellness. Revitalize your bioenergy, boost stamina, ease aches and improve your mental focus. Shield yourself from electromagnetic frequencies emitted from cell phones, laptops and other smart technologies. Restructure tap water, revitalize food and harmonize everything around you. Elevate well-being with LifeSpring, made in the USA. Order today from VanessaElston.com.
And we're back. Thank you so much for staying with us. I've got with me today a wonderful guest, my sister, Andrea Moulding, author, best-selling author, not once but twice. And we're just talking about her book, Stay on the Bus, which is a funny guide, if you can say you can be funny about cancer, something that might put a smile on your face and when you're in the depths of depression, and will help you, give you the information you need to guide you through the process to recovering and surviving and thriving, really. So, Andrea, before we went to the break, we were just talking about how cancer changes you and how you become more honest to yourself, really, and in terms of how you react with other people and situations. Give me a couple of examples of things that have happened to you where you've just adopted this new way of living, of being really honest about how you feel about something or whether you want to get involved in it.
Well, there's so many, aren't there? I think it's from the very small things. I think it even starts with the kids saying, "Mum, will you take me to college because it's raining?" No, sorry, I'm working, or I'm busy. Although today I did take them to college because it was absolutely pouring with rain. So, but normally I will say no. Tough. You've got to, walk because it's good for you. And my mum never took me to college. But that's about my time as well, because having a disruptive 20 minutes out of my day driving them to college affects my work schedule, and then I get tired, things like that. But I think it's more about learning to advocate, if that's the right word for yourself. When I first was going through the kind of medical stuff, I turned into kind of 14-year-old, whatever you say, yeah, okay, But now I'm like, well, I'm not sure about that. I'm not happy with that. I will not argue with the doctors, but I'll put across my point of view, and dig my heels in sometimes, and just ask, not be frightened to ask questions and not see them as the kind of holy grail, because you're an important person in that treatment plan. The way you kind of react to things can influence how you get better. You see what I mean? So it's important if you don't feel comfortable about things. Like if they want to bring in students when you've got your top off, and I'm so used to it, I don't really care. But sometimes I don't want loads of students poking me about and looking at me, and that's okay. It's okay to say no. It's not like the medical profession's going to kind of, big hole's going to swallow them up. That's you advocating for your own kind of mental health, as it were, because you don't feel like it.
Well, I think that's really important, because when I was ill and they suggested that I went on chemo drugs and I hadn't even got cancer for my arthritis, which they couldn't they couldn't diagnose exactly anyway. It was like, well, it might be this or it might be that. I just said, no, I'm going on a chemo drug. I haven't got cancer. Why on earth would you put, it's going to have 5 side effects. You have to give me 5 other drugs to counteract those. No, thank you. And they were like, you can't say no, thank you. I think I can, actually. I think I can refuse your treatment. Thank you very much. And I'm not suggesting that anybody refuses treatment, but what I'm saying, and I think what I heard you say, is that you need to get the information and be happy that you do have a decision to make, that it's not being made for you.
Exactly. Well, I think, I've recently had breast reconstruction surgery, and I had what's called a DEP flap, where you take your rather ample stomach fat and, make a boob out of it. And through doing the podcast, I've met the most amazing advocates in the USA who are called the flatties. And they advocate having a double mastectomy and being flat. Now, I only had one mastectomy, so for me, I was lopsided. And being flat isn't an option in the UK, really. Nobody mentioned it to me. Whereas in America, there's a whole bunch of women now that kind of are the flat. They call themselves the flatties, and they all over the USA, and they go flat on beaches and take loads of pictures. They're really cool, and I think it's really important that women have the options. And I think that if I didn't know about that, but I think the situation I'm in now, if I'd had a double mastectomy, I certainly probably would have remained flat as an option, and I would have been able to say that and articulate that to the surgeon. Whereas before, I was kind of a gibbering wreck. Do you know what I mean?
Well, the other thing is it's a lot of information to take on board, isn't it? And you're constantly being bombarded. And it's very hard not to be emotional about it unless you're a complete psychopath. So talk to me about the importance of having somebody with you to take that information on board for you while you just sort of zone out after they've slapped you with something else.
Well, I was very fortunate that I took Jo with me, my Macmillan friend. She came up to sit with me, and she, I couldn't take anything in. Everything just went up completely over my head. And I'd just sit there and I'd hear the words, and I didn't really know what they meant. And Jo would write everything down, and then she'd tell me what they'd said. I said, they didn't say that, did they? She taught me through it. And I think that's really important, that you take a pad and piece of paper if you have to go on your own, and you write notes. And I think as you go through treatment, you become stronger as a person. Well, I did. You kind of accept it, and then you just stay on the bus. You do what they tell you to do. But that doesn't mean that you know all the steps along the way. You have to take someone with you sometimes, or you just have to say, can you repeat that? I don't understand it. Whereas a lot of people won't even say that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, I've always said to anyone, if you don't understand something, ask a question.
Yeah,
And, my children, they never stop asking questions, do they? Sometimes you feel like you're in a court, the amount, what about this? What about that?
yeah,
But,
exactly.
and I mean, you've got teenagers, it's even worse.
Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about your podcast, Get It Off Your Chest, because you've mentioned it a couple of times. Where can people find this podcast and what's that all about? Because is this your way of extending the community that you were talking about before?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was really funny, and I was very fortunate to meet Estelle through my book, Stay on the Bus. She is an editor, she runs her own publishing company, and we just bonded on a phone call. You know, when you kind of meet someone and the universe puts you together, we absolutely got on like a house on fire. And it turned out she'd had breast cancer as well. So we started telling each other all these kind of really inappropriate stories and laughing, like drains. And we said, you know what, we should make this into a podcast. So we run a podcast. It's called Get It Off Your Chest, The Funny Side of Breast Cancer. And what it is, it's the idea behind it is that when you tell people you're having cancer, everyone goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear you've got cancer." And cancer is whispered. But what we do is we want people to be outrageous, we want them to be rude, we want all the ridiculous stories that people have got, the sort of stories you tell people down the pub, because we want cancer to be normalised. We don't want it to be hidden. We don't want people to be isolated, and we don't want people to be fearful about having that conversation. On the other hand, laughter and humour is seen it's got loads and loads of benefits for health. It increases your breathing. Having a belly laugh is really, really good for you. And so we've just started the podcast, and we kind of, started it. First of all, it was just me and her talking. We get a guest on every week now. And we've had some amazing guests, absolutely hilarious guests. And we've just carried it on. We've had really good feedback, and you can get it on, all the usual channels, that you listen to your podcast on. And we've got listeners from all over the world. It's hilarious. So yeah, I love it.
I really like that because I'm a great believer in laughter. And a friend of mine met the Dalai Lama years ago and
Oh,
said to
really?
him, what's the meaning of life? How can I enjoy my life? And she was waiting for something really profound to come out of his mouth. And he just said, giggle and laugh through life and your life will be good. And she was like, that's
Yeah.
it. And he was like, yeah, that's it. And I have to say, as you say, every time you have a good laugh, you feel amazing, don't you? You feel sort of
You do.
sparkling
It
and
releases
tingly.
endorphins. And, if somebody's going through chemo and you're sitting in a kind of horrible faux leather chair like you do with the NHS, I don't know what they're like in America, they're probably made of gold or something in some of the clinics, but, it is horrible. You look around and there's just a sea of people. And if you can just put in a podcast, it's 20 minutes long and it makes you laugh out loud. And you think, you know what, I'm not alone. These are people that have been through it, different people every week, and they're still smiling and having a laugh about it. Then it is a community that we're creating. And people have said it's made them feel a lot better, which is one of the reasons we do it, really.
I think that's it, isn't it? Reaching out to people and saying you're not alone and making them feel better and also giving them the hope, being the success and the thriving survivor at the end of it, double author, public speaker, all those sorts of things it's such an amazing leap from being diagnosed, hit by a bus to staying on the bus and for you writing it, that's going to help everybody stay on the journey. So tell us a funny story from your podcast of something ridiculous that's happened to somebody, because I'm sure people that are listening could do with a good laugh as well.
Well,
Watching rather.
we had a woman on, Kerry, who said she was kind of CEO of a tech firm. And when she went bald, she said, I don't want everyone in the kind of boardroom to look at me. So she went and had eyes. When she went bald, she had eyes tattooed on the back of her head. So she said, if people are going to talk about my bald head, they'll talk about my eyes. She used to go in bars and kind of pretend she was an alien, you know, with these eyes on the back of her head. We had a news anchor from America, Vanessa Eccles, who's going to be on our next podcast, actually. So watch this space. She was in a hurricane presenting, and her wig blew off, and just things like that, really. And I think if you kind of can confront the ridiculousness of what happens to you, you know, then it just makes it all, you know, you take the power away from the pain to make it sound, you know, poetic. Yeah. But it's true. It's really true.
Yeah, I know. Can I tell the funny story about my daughter's wedding and your fake boob?
Oh, yes.
So we were at my daughter's wedding, and Andrea hadn't had her vasectomy. Her reconstruction at this point, but she had had a mastectomy, and she had a fake boob. And we were at this fabulous wedding in Spain, and this boob was really quite heavy, wasn't it, Andrea? Uncomfortable.
Chafing, Vanessa. It was chafing. And I was whining about it, remember? Anyway,
so we'd had a few drinks, and Andrea was, you know, being quite honest about the weight of a boob, how it was chafing and what have you. So my friend Pip and I said, right, come with us, let's go to the loo, and we're going to sort you out. So we took out the fake boob and we absolutely stuffed her bra with toilet paper. Wet toilet paper, and we moulded and sculpted a perfect match to our actual boob, which was a lot lighter and a lot more comfortable in the heat. Anyway, we were then stuck. We didn't take our handbags with us. So we were then stuck with the fake boob. And it was something, we all had summer dresses on, so we had nowhere to sort of stash it. I said, never mind, so I'll pretend it's the handbag. So I folded it in half, and we walked back from the toilet. And as I got across, this guy said to me, I do love your shoes and the fact that your handbag matches them.
And you said, it's from Milan, it's a one-off. And he said, you can tell. It was this big plastic boob that you just folded in half.
It's just so funny. We all really stay for, you know, yeah, it's from Milan, it's a one-off, it's a new range, it's not on the market yet. So stomped off. And then just absolutely collapsed in hysterics. So, you know, there are plenty of things to make my eyes water telling that story. There are plenty of things to make you laugh, and you can get your giggles on the way, even if it is, you know, difficult circumstances. But I'll just never forget that, really. And I'm just dying to see it next time and actually have a proper handbag in my hand.
Or maybe you should market that handbag, because it obviously had the look, didn't it?
Clearly.
It matched to your outfit, actually, as I remember. The colour was the same.
It was peachy colour, and it matched my peach shoes, which was just incredible. Gosh, that really did make me laugh. It made my mascara run. But Andrea, we're coming to the end of our time together. We've got sort of, you know, a few minutes left. What I'd like you to do really is to anybody that's just got the diagnosis and they're watching this and they're still sort of feeling really sorry for themselves, rightly so, I'm not taking that away from them. If there were 3 things that you could, top tips, if you will, that you would give them at this point, you know, if you remember where you were, that would help, what would they actually be?
Yeah, I wish you'd given me this question before we started the podcast. I think, like you said, don't let anyone tell you how you should feel about your diagnosis. So you will be bombarded with, you know, you have to fight it, and you become a warrior and all that battle speak. I think it's really damaging for people because it puts pressure on them. That would be my first thing, is just recognize how you feel, and, you know, try and see it as something that is external to you, and say to yourself, this will pass. You know, this feeling is totally understandable, but it will pass, and I will get my head around it. The second thing is try to, you know, just have the confidence to advocate for yourself, because when people come around, they'll say things like, "Ooh, we'll do it, whatever you want." And what it does is it puts pressure on you, because then you have to come up with a list of things. So say to people, if you want to tell them that you've got breast cancer, this is the help that I need. So I'm pushing that to you. If you're able to do any of these things, do them, but try not to kind of take all of that on yourself, because that will be, it's just another pressure you don't need. And just try and, things will happen. That horrify you, like your eyelashes fall out, and maybe your toenails will go black and fall off, which I found really quite difficult. But in my book, I talk about surfing goth nail varnish, and it can be a thing. So try and find humour. It's not always easy, but you will find that you'll meet lots of other people, and humour will get you through it. And then when you've got your funny stories, DM me and come on my show.
That's it, isn't it? Like, let's share the funny stories and let's keep everybody's vibration up, even in the most difficult times. But what would you say to people that are friends of somebody that's just got the really bad news? What would be some advice for them?
I think that we're very British, and it's like when people die, we don't have the language to deal with it. I think you just need to say, you don't have to kind of come up with any kind of advice like eat a rainbow diet and you must do this and you must do that. Just say you'll be there for them, and yes, I know you feel like rubbish, but I'm there for you, and they'll get strength from your energy, and your support. And that's what gets you through it, is other people just being there for you, because you get energy from other people. And people that fall away, and there will be people that you let you down. If they're not right for you, and that's fine. You just got to let them go and not worry about it. It's hard, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's very disappointing. I know when I got divorced, I was really shocked at who stepped forward and who stepped back, actually.
Yeah.
The people that you've done the most for were the least willing to help and support you. It was quite incredible.
Yeah.
There's
It's
something
hard
else.
to take, but it's the universe showing you who's a good soul, they do the work for you, so you don't have to work it out yourself. So that's a kind of benefit of having cancer, is that you'll know who your friends are at the end of it, and you'll be a better person at the end of it. It'll change you, but don't expect it all to be finished. You always have scan anxiety and things like that, but that's okay. Just keep talking.
Yeah. I was just going to touch on that for a minute, because like you'd say, there is scan anxiety and people don't talk about this. So you've recovered, you've survived, you've started to thrive, but now you've got scan anxiety. How do you deal with that?
Well, I talk about it actually in my book. I've split it into 3 bits: diagnosis, treatment, and then I call the last bit cutting the apron string. When they say, you've seen them like every day for kind of a year, and then they say, "Oh, see you next year," and you panic. And I think you have to be very mindful about your mental health. So I walk a lot. I live in Loughborough, which is, not exactly a beautiful place like Suffolk, but I will go out and do kind of forest bathing, just with trees and moss and anything, just to kind of get that centeredness, because that's the right word, because I think it's very easy to let your mind, your mind isn't always your friend. You have to tame it sometimes and be mindful that you're not kind of sinking into that anxiety. Try and recognize it, but let it go. And if you do need help from a doctor or whatever, don't be frightened to speak out and tell people. That's what I would say.
So connecting with nature, very, very important. That's what I tell people to do in my work. And if you're not thriving, it's more important than ever to connect with nature, because the frequency of nature is all about growth, doesn't know anything else. And if you think about weeds, some people think, what on earth is she talking about? But if you go out onto your patio, there's always a weed growing through, sometimes incredibly in a healthy way, which is very irritating. Now, that weed's come up through earth, tons of concrete, a few slabs, and it's still heading up and thriving because nature knows how to make that weed thrive. And if we can get in touch with nature and start tuning into that vibration, then we're actually going to start thriving as well. And something else you said is, although it's happening to you now, it's about constantly imagining being better or having another focus. Like you focused on writing these 2 amazing books. It's about escape, really, isn't it? Not accepting, even though you're going through it, that this is your story, making it different, even if it's just in your head. And then it becomes reality.
Or didn't Bruce Lee say, never talk badly to yourself, even in jest, because your mind can't tell the difference. And your mind is the most powerful thing. It's quite stunning, isn't it, really? So, choose to reframe cancer. It'll make you grow, and it'll make you, change, and it'll change you won't be the same at the end of it, but that's okay. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think what you are is a new and improved version of what you are before. And I think that's great hope to give to anybody watching this. So thank you very much for that. Sadly, we've come to the end of our time together. Where can people find you? Where can they get the book? How can they find your podcast? How can they get in touch with you if they want to become part of your community?
Right, okay, very quickly. Both books, Throwing Salt at the Devil, Stay on the Bus, are available on Amazon. The podcast is across all the usual platforms. Wherever you listen, we are. We've got an Instagram account for Get It Off Your Chest. We have my Instagram account for the book is called Lollipops Stay on the Bus. We're on Facebook. We're toying with TikTok at the moment. I'm putting my toe in. We have an email address, which is stories@tittytowers.com for the podcast. So you can get me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm everywhere, basically. So I want to hear from you.
I'm magnificent, darling. I'm absolutely everywhere. Well, everybody, make sure that you do tap in with Andrea. If you know anybody that's going through cancer treatment or has just had the diagnosis, then stay on the bus for them, because it is the best present that you could possibly give anybody. It gives you all the information on everything you need to know and things in there that will make you smile even in your darkest hour. And tune into Andrea's podcast, Get It Off Your Chest, because again, this is black comedy that only the special club can really, truly appreciate. And it's a real uplifter for anybody that's going through treatment. So thank you so much, Andrea, for joining us. I know that you've really uplifted everybody.
Thank you.
Listening to all your achievements. And, I can't wait for your sequel to Salt. And is there any few last words that you'd like to add before we close down the show?
Well, I think that when you are diagnosed with breast cancer, I'm 5 years clear now, and there's plenty of people like me. So it doesn't have to be, the death sentence that you will think it is when you're first diagnosed. So just remember, there's lots and lots of people out there going through it with you, and it can make you grow. So, please do get in touch and seek help if you need it.
And stay on the bus, everybody, because it will get you through. Andrea, thank you so much. Thank you to all our lovely viewers for staying with us and being tuned in again to WTF What's the Frequency. And I look forward to seeing you next week for another fantastic conversation. Love and light, everybody.